Today's episode is brought to you by SalesCred Pro, the strategic resource for B2B sales that fortifies your credibility and accelerates the trust building needed for building successful business relationships. Get your free 7-day trial now at salescred.com/PRO. Welcome to the Manage Smarter podcast with hosts C. Lee Smith and Audrey Strong. We're glad you're here for discussions on new ways to manage smarter, hire, develop, and retain talent, improve results, and propel team performance to new heights. This is the Manage Smarter podcast.
We really haven't had, I don't think we've had an attorney on the show, have we?
If we do, it's only been one. So it's high time that we do it again. And, this is one of those things where people love their attorney, but they hate opposing counsel. And, but like, quite frankly, as a business owner, if you are just starting up, or you have a small firm or whatever, there is this tendency then to want to skimp on their legal fees and try to get things done as cheaply as possible. That can be really costly in the long run. I speak from experience on that. But also it's a matter of, what I want to learn more about is, this perception of how we think, law firms operate based on what we see on TV and everything like that. And what it really takes then to be a successful manager, a successful leader, in a law firm, and to help grow it and develop it into its fullest potential. That's really what I want to hope to learn more about today. That's
right. So welcome to Manage Smarter, everyone. I'm Audrey Strong, Vice President of Communications here at Sales Fuel.
And I'm C. Lee Smith. I'm the CEO and founder of Sales Fuel and a big fan of LA Law back in the day.
Oh, you're dating yourself, but
I know a little bit.
Guest today
All right, the good wife is more current, I suppose, right?
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one too. Luis Scott is a respected attorney and consultant, owner of Bader Scott Injury Lawyers, an 8-figure firm consulting specializing in helping legal professionals optimize and grow their practices. Over his 20 years as a legal professional, he's been recognized by various legal organizations and was a managing partner of a successful law firm with more than, you said almost 200 employees. Luis, thank you for coming today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
My dad was a middle manager, department head within a big pharmaceutical company. And he always said to me, I don't manage 20 people, I manage 20 personalities. And is that kind of what it's like at the law firms?
Oh my gosh, I'm surprised it's only 20 personalities. Sometimes it feels like
everyone has at least one. Everyone has
Yeah, no, it's definitely, people are the hardest part of business because at scale, people are very predictable, but as individuals, people are incredibly unpredictable, and that makes it very complicated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it just seems like I have lawyer friends in multiple different firms, and it's like they're working like dogs. And they're really working long hours and everything like that. And the interesting thing is, like, I see basically, you mentioned the personalities. I see basically 3 personalities. It's like who they are as people, which is how I know them. And then, who they are when they're working with you, and then who they are if they have to litigate. I mean, it's like those are 3 personalities I can think of right off the top of my head, and they all have them. So it's like, what's it like to manage that?
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is that it's, there's 2 different types of employees in a law firm. You got the lawyers, and then you have the what I would call general staff, which is the non-lawyers. And the way I look at the personalities is who they really are, who they are when they're with their boss, and who they are when they're with their coworkers. And I think those are 3 different people for the most part. And I think one of my aspirations is to know who they really are, not who they are just with their boss. Like, that's what I really want to know. But the lawyer personality, and I can say this as a lawyer, it's a lot of ego in the room when you have 2 or 3 lawyers. Actually, when you have 1 lawyer, there's a lot of ego in the room. When you have 2 or 3 lawyers, the ego really overflows. And part of that is the way that they train you in law school. They tell you you're the brightest of the class. You're the smartest and all this stuff, and they really build you up. But yeah, managing the personalities is very complicated, and I think the better you get at creating a unified personality in an individual, like knowing who they are in all 3 areas, really helps you.
I want to tap into some of your past experience, even before the law firm, where I see you've had experience as a mediator. And a lot of times managers and leaders, we have to play referee. And particularly when we're dealing, in an area, whether it be legal or sales or anything like that, where you have, strong egos involved and everything like that. I mean, what kind of tips can you give to a manager to be a better mediator of difficult situations and difficult personalities?
If you're a manager and you want to be a mediator, you need to be really good at not taking sides. And I think that that's one of the hardest parts of being a manager, because we all have an affinity towards people that we sometimes don't even recognize. Like, we may see two employees and say outwardly that we view everyone as equals, but really we have a better relationship with one than we do the other. And so there's a natural inclination for us to show a bias towards one over the other. But if you want to be a really great manager and a really great mediator with people, you have to be able to look at the facts and not the emotions. You have to be able to look at the people as individual people who you don't have a personal relationship with, but rather you're just assessing the facts that of the situation through their lens and through their perspective, and then making a determination as to how you find common ground. And so I think that's how you use the mediation tactic to really unify two people who are at odds on a particular situation.
Before you came into the room, Luis, we were talking about this with Lee, and I said, I don't like mediation because there's no clear winner or loser, and I want to win. Like, I said, what do you do?
And Audrey, it was you that said that, not me.
I did say that. So, and because I'm a linear thinker. So what do you do when you have two employees? So mediation, I agree. Like, it's a nice thing, and everybody hopefully feels like they got something out of it. But what do you do when you have two employees that are just diametrically opposed and aren't down with the whole mediating?
And they got that jungle fighter personality where there has to be, if I win, you have to lose.
Yeah, that sounds like the lawyers. I mean, that they're very, they're fighters, and and when they have a particular perspective on a case, they believe that their case is the right one. And it's really hard because mediation requires that two people have a desire to find resolution. And when you have people who don't have a desire to find resolution, you're going to end with two unhappy people. And that's the difficult part about managing people in general, is that going into it, if you don't have two people who are going to work in an amicable way, you will not be able to find a resolution. What you will find is a solution where two people are still not happy about the outcome. And I think one of the things that I've really stressed, and I was talking to somebody actually recently about this, that if you want to be a great manager and a great leader, you need to learn the psychology of people, what makes them tick, how do they think, how do they behave, how do they react in certain situations, and really get good at working with them within their paradigm, within their perspective, so that you can help them see that maybe what their position is not the position needed for the moment, even if they're right. And I think it's very, very challenging. I mean, you can look in even the political world right now, right? It's like nobody agrees on anything. It's like, and we're digging into our position. And if you're not willing to at least see the other side, it's very, very difficult to find any kind of a common ground.
As a leader, I mean, to be able to do that takes a great degree of courage. And I know that's something you like to talk about is, how do leaders develop the level of courage that they need to be able to stand up to the strong personalities, to be able to mediate a tenuous situation, and to be able then to help everybody feel like they've been heard, and not take sides, and to go. I mean, this is to go where the evidence leads you, as opposed to having your conclusion first and finding the evidence to support it.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the tricks is not having an outcome in mind. And so if you don't have an outcome in mind, it's it's a lot easier to let the evidence guide you. But if you have an outcome in mind, you're going to view the evidence through a particular lens. Recently, I was sitting in a jury. I didn't get picked, but I spent the whole day going through the jury. And one of the questions was, how many of you in here, regardless of what you hear, have already made a determination about this case? And there was 3 people that raised their hand.
Oh man,
they want to go home.
That's true. That's true. What's funny is that one of them actually got picked for the jury.
God. Wow.
One of the guys who said, I've made up my mind already, got picked. I was shocked. But nevertheless, what happens is if you already have an outcome in mind, I mean, it's really hard to manage that. And it's hard to create the right circumstances where you find a true solution if somebody's already kind of dug into what they want to see as the outcome. And I think, when I talk about the courage to lead as a leader, it is very, very tough to be a leader. A lot of people, they think they're leaders, but they're really managers. And the true indication of a person.
What's the difference?
Oh yeah. The real difference is that a manager wants to dictate the outcomes of the individual activities of a person, where a leader is focusing on the individual as an individual. It's like, how do I build the person? How do I build them in character? How do I build them in skills so that they can then make decisions on their own behalf for the benefit of the company? Where a manager is in the day-to-day, they're working with the person, they're helping them, do the task. And then they're holding them accountable to those tasks. So a lot of people say, I'm a leader, but really they're just a manager. They're not really leading. They're not uplifting people or growing them. They're just simply working with them on the day-to-day task, because leadership is really hard and it's painful, especially when relationships are involved. And that's the hardest part. One of my friends used to tell me, having almost 200 employees is like having 200 relationships. And every time you lose one, it's like getting broken up with again. It's painful.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, it's like when it happens to me, I mean, Audrey will tell you, it's like I'm, replaying in my mind, what could I have done differently? Why did they leave? Everything. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen very often in this company, but still, when it does, it feels like a breakup. And it's like, and you want to know the reason why, and you want to try to understand it, and you want to try to make course corrections and everything like that, so that doesn't happen again. And it just feels crappy, especially when you lose somebody that you don't want to lose. Losing somebody that you want to lose or whatever is a totally different story. But
well, I want just one quick, put a period on it, on the mediation thing. Luis, tell me what you think of this. I had a manager once describe how you can better get to the being open to mediation, a compromise. Two things. Tell me if you like this. One is, would you rather be right or be happy? Is the question to ask.
Yes.
And then the second thing, I'm trying to think, I just now forgot what the second thing was. What would you rather be right or be happy? And then just, the second one escapes me, but I think the happiness thing and not being entrenched is really important.
Yeah. I mean, I've actually heard that said a little bit different. It was like, I'd rather be rich than right. I'd rather be rich than right. So like sometimes, being rich doesn't necessarily mean you make more money. A lot of times it does, but I'd rather be rich than right. In other words, I'd rather make the money. I'd rather have more time. Rather have more peace. I'd rather rich in my everyday life, because like there's nothing better than living in harmony with people. I don't know why people choose to be in constant friction. It's just beyond me, to be honest.
Well, yeah, and when I'm a long distance cyclist, so when we're out riding the bikes and we're riding on the roads with cars and everything like that, we have a saying that's very similar. It's like you never want to be dead right.
Right.
So it's like you can be right, but going up against a 2-ton vehicle or something like that, you're dead. So what's the point of being right? And it's like it's sort of like sometimes you just have to sacrifice, that you have to be right. It's like, no, it's like we have, that's not the end goal is for me to be right. The end goal is something bigger than that. And they have to sacrifice and let that go sometimes, unless you're violating your principles.
But I do remember the second thing. It's stop making everything a zero-sum game.
Yes.
Just stop doing the math. It's not a zero-sum game. There doesn't have to be, because you're not getting what you want doesn't mean that something's been taken from you and given to X department over here. That's not it at all. Just stop thinking about that.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that I think in business in general, especially when it comes to competition, and this is something that I recently said in my private Facebook group that I have with my members, is that even if 1 million people knew you, there's still 330 million people who don't know who you are. And like there's this idea that there's really competition in this world. There's not really competition. If you have a great product, you can overcome anything that's happening in the marketplace. And I love telling this example. I used to live in a little city in West Georgia that had about 35,000 residents. And somehow this little city that had restaurants, that had businesses, managed to have 2 Chick-fil-A's, and both of them have 3 lanes in their drive-thru. In a city of 35,000, there's 2 Chick-fil-A's with three drive-through lanes on each side. Like, there's no competition. If you have a great product, not enough people even know about you yet. Go out there and market, and you'll see what can happen.
I want to find the person that did the planning and the organization, everything like that, how to make the drive-through work at a Chick-fil-A, because they do so much more volume and it's so much more efficient than any other fast food drive-through that I've ever experienced. So I want to find that person and have that person like lead my projects and stuff.
Yeah, it's wild. I remember reading something that like the average KFC does 850,000 in revenue per year, and Chick-fil-A averages 4 million in revenue. Like, talk about insane. Yeah.
Well, speaking of that, one of your topics is developing a predictable business. So
that's
why
perfect.
Don't we transition over to that?
Yeah. I mean, Yeah, developing a predictable business starts by understanding how business works, right? And I think that one of the problems that people have is that they feel like business is complicated, and at the core, it's I try to simplify it for people, and I ask the question: when you start your business, what's the first thing you do? And everyone says the same thing: I tell people about it. And I go, exactly. And so if you want to grow a bigger business, you need to tell more people about it. So the business funnel starts with what I call creating awareness. And so you want to create a predictable amount of awareness every single month. This month, I'm gonna create awareness with 100 people. Next month, I'm gonna create awareness with 120. Next month, 140, 160, and you start seeing the compounding effect of creating awareness with more and more people. Now, the better your product is, the more desirable it is, the less people that need to know about it to purchase it, right? But the lower the desirability, such as legal services, because I consult lawyers. And so not everybody's a lawyer. So I need to let more people know about my services in order to create the awareness that I need to make the sales that I need. So it starts at the top of the funnel, creating awareness, and then it goes into creating leads. So awareness generates leads. Leads will generate sales opportunities. Sales will generate conversions. Conversions will generate revenue. People will then produce the service that you're promoting. And then ultimately through efficiencies in operations, that creates profit. And so the understanding that business funnel and asking where am I lacking in predictability is where you hit it first. So if you don't have predictable awareness, you start there. If you don't have predictable leads, you start there. If you don't have predictable sales, you start there. And that's how you start developing predictability throughout the organization.
So what about when the unpredictable happens? There's a pandemic, or there's an economic crash, or there's a hurricane that blows through town, or something like that. So where does the adaptability come into play there?
So here's one of the things that I always tell people is we build for the ordinary occurrences, and then we pivot in the extraordinary occurrences, right? The pandemic, the hurricane is an extraordinary occurrence. We pivot in those moments, but we don't spend our time dealing with exceptions. And this is one of the reasons when someone asks me the question, well, what happens if this happens in my business? I go, how likely is that going to happen? Oh, very low. Okay, so we're not going to focus on that. We're going to focus on what happens ordinary, because I mentioned earlier in the call that at scale, people are predictable. As individuals, they're unpredictable. So we're going to focus on what's predictable at scale. And so think about the airline industry. They know how many people are going to fly in the summer. They know how many people are going to fly to the Super Bowl. A couple of years ago, I think it was, I can't remember, the Super Bowl was in LA. And the Rams were playing in that Super Bowl. I can't remember.
Yeah, I'm a Bengals fan, so you had to bring that up.
Okay, so I'm sorry. Oh gosh, a sore subject. Okay, so the Bengals, Delta Airlines set up like 12 more flights to get the people there to LA from one particular. They knew how many people were going to be traveling. They knew how many people needed flights. They know how many hotels are required. When we're planning for the World Cup, they know how many hotels need to be built and how many highways need to be created and how much resources needs to be dedicated to that, because people at scale are predictable. So we build our business based on the predictability of people, which is a big part of my book called The King of Growth, which is predictability in business comes from the fact that we know that at scale people are predictable, and we use that to our advantage, and provide a service that people need at scale. So to answer the question more directly, I don't even worry about the hurricane and I don't worry about the pandemic because it's so uncommon. I'm worried about just what I can control.
I'm thinking about how lawyers grow their practice, and I think you guys have something else that you've got to overcome. SalesFuel did the State of Credibility in America study just this summer, 2023. Found that only 35% of Americans view lawyers as credible in what they say and do, that they can actually be trusted. And I would think if I asked that question with some of the people that I know that you consult a lot with, which is the personal injury attorneys, I would think that number would be even lower. So how do you factor that in and overcome that when you're trying to grow a practice?
I think one of the reasons that's happened is because we have that term ambulance chaser, right? Everybody's heard the word ambulance chaser. It's like, it's the big, the joke or whatever.
I get into a car accident, I get like 20 different, mailings, in my mailbox within 2 days.
Absolutely. And it's obviously something that is a concern of people. But one of the ways that I overcome that is I want to be in the continuous state of education. And I tell people, the improvements right now, we've gone 20 years without a single airline accident, and thank God, because like those are devastating when a plane falls out of the air and someone dies. And one of the reasons that that's happened is because of the amount of lawsuits that have happened over the years. 30 years of lawsuits that have made it mandatory that they do checks, that have made it mandatory that the mechanics work a certain way, that have made it mandatory that they have contingencies on these planes. And so when people tell me ambulance chasers, and I go, look, you have a very limited view and a very limited scope of what lawyers actually do. Let me educate you on the McDonald's case. So people bring this up. It's always surprising when people hear that the McDonald's lady was an 80-year-old lady who had third-degree burns through her clothes. That's how hot the coffee was. An 80-year-old lady with third-degree burns through her clothes. It wasn't some 20-year-old, girl who was, just being careless. The coffee was way too hot. And so we needed to put heat regulators so it didn't happen again. And so lawyers make communities safer. And I use individualized examples where people have heard things out of context, and I've helped them see the proper perspective. And I think that through education and more lawyers being better at educating people about these kinds of cases really helps our communities, because at the end, that's how we make things safer. Do people take advantage as lawyers? Of course, but they do as medical practitioners. And I don't want to get into the lawyer versus doctor, but the last time I checked, I think there was 500,000 medical malpractices committed every single year. And nobody ever says we don't need doctors. Nobody's ever said that. 500,000 a year, medical malpractice, like known medical malpractice. So we sometimes we look at the occurrences that seem outlandish, and then we generalize. And I want to educate people on what the facts are about these kind of cases.
We've got about a minute left. And people will armchair quarterback and complain until they actually need a lawyer, in which case they will want a fine lawyer to handle their business. So,
right, exactly.
But go ahead and give your website, Luis, and anything else you want to share with the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to know more about me and find me on social media, LuisScottJR.com. It's LuisScottJR.com, and you can find all about me there, including my books.
I have one last question for you, and this is about management and leadership. It's like, how do you know, or what's a good test where to know when it's time to stop trying to solve a problem yourself and get a lawyer involved?
Oh man, I think that you get a lawyer involved when the complexity of the matter is beyond basic understanding, which is probably 99% of the time.
There you go. The devil is in the details.
That's it.
Thanks, Luis. I appreciate you coming on the show. This has been very interesting.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and recommend on iTunes, Overcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also get more great information at salesfuel.com.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.